the sun! Shields up, Ironbreakers. Rurikhan here, coming at you with another edition of the Cons Cast, and in today's episode we're going to be talking about Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. And the reason we're talking about this game today is because Game Informer got to play it, and they've been releasing new information. Now, I would like to give a special shout out to Reddit user Heavybrute for posting a rundown on Reddit, which I will be using to basically bring up a bunch of talking points for Sekiro. So thank you very much. And also a shout out to Epic Name Bro for allowing me to use some of his Sekiro footage in order to illustrate this particular video. Anyway, let's get started. So the very first thing that I want to talk about is progression. There is going to be no stat progression. That means you will not be putting points into strength, constitution, dexterity, nothing like that. But one thing that actually surprised me is that there is also not going to be any gear progression. What does that mean? That means that you're not going to be changing your main weapon or your armor at all throughout most of the game, throughout all of the game, actually, I'm assuming, which comes as a little bit of a surprise. I wasn't expecting that. I figured you would at least like swap your katana around a little bit, but apparently that is not going to be the case. However, you will swap your prosthetic tool, and that is going to be something that is going to give you a little bit of variety as you play through the game. And that is kind of like where the different play styles are going to be coming from. It's going to be on the different tools that you use and the different skills that you actually apply to your character. And how do skills work? Well, you're actually going to be gaining experience whenever you kill enemies and bosses, and that experience can be used in skill trees. That means more than one skill tree in order to upgrade your character. And when you upgrade your character, you're going to be able to get both active abilities as well as passive abilities. When I read this, it kind of felt like it's going to be a little bit like what we had on Neo. If you guys remember that, we had, certain things that would be like, oh, you deal a percentage more damage with this thing, or here's this new special attack that you can now do. It's going to be the same thing. As a matter of fact, one of the skills that we can talk about, because it's also been talked about in this article, is the blood smoke skill, which was present on the TGS trailer, which I think I actually talked about how I was wondering if that was just like a special effect or what it was, but it looks like it's a special skill that you can do, and I think it's also a killing blow. But basically the blood smoke skill is something that when you kill an enemy, you can just like splatter his blood all over the place. I don't know exactly what else it does, but the cool thing about that skill is that if you use that on venomous enemies, you'll be able to poison other enemies that are close to you. But anyways, skills like that is stuff that you'll be able to get. Also, like, how when you throw your shuriken, there's a follow-up attack that you can do after that kind of closes the gap between you and the enemy. That is another skill that you can get. And then there are also skills that will allow you to do stuff like increase how much healing you get from your healing gourd and so on and so forth. So that in and of itself is quite the departure from Souls games, because as we know, this is going to depart quite heavily from Souls games, even though, there is naturally a little bit of inspiration and certain things that will feel familiar to us. There's no denying that this is going to be a very different game, and it makes me that much more excited about the potential and just the sheer fact that it's the next thing from Miyazaki. Thank God. Anyway, beyond all this, you will also be finding materials throughout the game which will allow you to upgrade your prosthetics with more devastating abilities. Like I said, that is going to be the type of things that will change your playstyle, whether you prefer to use the axe more often or you prefer to use the flame vent more often, or whatever happens to be your chosen prosthetic tool. I think that is going to be an interesting thing, combining the prosthetic tool with a certain skill set, like certain special attacks and whatnot, and being able to like play with those things in order to bring diversity to your builds. As a matter of fact, Miyazaki actually expects that the customization of combat arts and prosthetic upgrades to be the thing that adds replay value, as well as help people progress through tougher bosses. Like you get stuck on a boss, like maybe go grind a couple of monsters, get some better skills, or explore branching paths. Anyway, The item that you're going to be using to power your prosthetic is called a spirit emblem. These can be replenished at sculptor's idols, which from the description, they seem to work kind of like bonfires, but you can also get them from fallen enemies. So if you think, for instance, like Bloodborne, you'd be able to kill a bunch of enemies and you'd be able to get blood vials off of them from time to time, or even actually the better example is you'd be able to get silver bullets from certain enemies. So kind of like your spirit emblems are kind of like the silver bullets that you've used previously in Bloodborne. As a matter of fact, it is very, very close to the mechanic that we had in Bloodborne, because the silver bullets were also used to power stuff like spells. They were used to, as ammunition for your weapons. And this kind of feels like the same thing. The spirit emblems will be used to power your prosthetic tools, and you will probably consume those spirit emblems as you kill enemies. Now, the cool thing is that there's also all those stealth mechanics that you'll be able to apply when dealing with certain enemies. So even if you run out of spirit emblems, you're still going to have other options that don't necessarily involve you using your prosthetic tool. Except for the grappling hook. I get a feeling that the grappling hook is going to be something that you will be able to use a lot more freely. Anyway, beyond these spirit emblems, you're also going to have a healing gourd, which is basically going to work as your Estus flask. And as we mentioned previously, you're going to be able to reinforce, at least I think you're going to be able to reinforce the effect of the healing gourd by upgrading certain skills in your character with the experience that you earn from enemies. Now, as you guys know, in Sekiro, there's going to be a very unique death mechanic in which you're going to have more than one life. So if you die, you'll be able to resurrect on the spot. However, you're going to use up one life in the game. But it seems that the way in which you recharge that life is basically by killing enemies with finishing blows. So it seems that one of the viable strategies that you might have is maybe you're doing a boss fight. Maybe you leave a couple of minor enemies in that fight so that you can attack the boss. And then if you die, you can basically kill one of the minor enemies to like regain the ability to die yet again. Now, I don't know what the limitations to that are going to be, but an interesting thing that was taken from the new information from Game Informer is that you are not actually going to lose experience when you die. Miyazaki does not want people to have the same corpse runs that we've experienced in Dark Souls, which basically, you die, you lose your souls, then you run back, get your souls back, try to kill everything, or you might die twice in a row and lose everything. However, this doesn't mean that there isn't going to be a death penalty. There most definitely will be a penalty for dying, but Miyazaki is not ready to tell you what it is just yet. We're still going to be having the storytelling through item descriptions, which is pretty much a staple. However, this time around, the main story itself is going to be a lot more easy to follow because you're going to have a set protagonist, and basically Miyazaki has stated that it's going to be easier for you to understand what the story is, and you're not going to have to go after every single item description to understand certain portions of the story. They also talked about, naturally, the kill wisely thing. So you're going to want to study the different packs of enemies instead of jumping, guns blazing. You're going to want to make sure that you look at patterns, you look at where your enemies are, and study stuff ahead of time so that you can actually, approach it from different angles. Like, oh, I'll jump over here and do a plunging attack here, or jump down there, or hide on this grass and eavesdrop, which eavesdrop is actually a mechanic that I think is going to be very interesting. Now, in the Game Informer piece, they're talking about how they listened in on a conversation with the eavesdrop mechanic as they were stealthing through a level, and they learned that a boss's specific weakness. They learned that a certain boss in the game was actually weak to fire. So that is going to be an interesting mechanic, I think, particularly to figure out, secret locations in the game. Maybe someone's like, oh, there's a secret passage over here, or maybe, oh, there's this treasure over in this location, or I hid this very cool thing that I found. Like, I found this mask or something like that, and I hid it, way over there, and you're listening in on this conversation, and then you'll be able to capitalize on that by going to get something that you weren't expecting. There are going to be several optional bosses throughout the game. As a matter of fact, the game is going to feature the rich level design that we've come to know from software. However, they are saying that the world and the areas feel larger and with even more options, which means that most likely we're going to have even more branching paths than what we are used to in the game. However, it seems that the game does start a little bit more limited. You're going to be seeing a couple of fog gates, which will kind of prevent you from progressing until you've killed certain characters. But by the time you reach about mid-game, Miyazaki says that everything is going to be a lot more open, and there are going to be a lot of optional paths that you can take in order to explore, find hidden enemies, find secret bosses, and you're gonna want to take down these optional bosses because they reward you with rosary beads that you can then use to upgrade your health and posture, which we talked about the posture system in previous Sekiro videos. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm going to put a link like on the right hand side of this video that you can go back to the video where I go much more in depth into combat and pretty much everything we know about that stuff. Now, navigating the map is going to be a lot more interesting because naturally you're going to have a grappling hook that is going to open up a lot of possibilities for us. You're going to be able to basically, jump up to locations that you're going to be able to approach areas in ways that we never even thought about, and you're going to be able to use that advantage to actually, figure out where you're attacking, how you're attacking, and even evading as a way to actually flee from enemies. I just see so much potential in that I can't wait to get my own hands on it, to just explore every little nook and cranny and figure out all the things that you can do. You're also going to be able to swim, which is going to be a first for pretty much any Miyazaki game that I'm aware of. You're not going to just fall into the water and die. You'll be able to swim. And exploration is going to pay off. Game Informer talks about how they went off on this separate path and they found these mutant chickens and these weird lizard things. And the lizard things were actually what they used the blood smoke skill on that I talked about earlier. And that blood smoke skill, basically, when used on those poisonous lizards, was going to poison everything around them, which is pretty cool. I want to see more stuff like that, like having certain skills that, when used in a certain way, are going to basically trigger, explosions, or basically trigger different effects than just like the cookie cutter stuff that we're used to. But the other way in which exploration pays off is that you might be able to find NPCs which will be able to assist you in defeating certain bosses and whatnot. Now, this is not particularly new to Miyazaki games. We've been able to do this before, but it seems, and again, this is not super confirmed, but it seems that if you recruit these NPCs and they die, that's a one-time thing. You're not going to be able to get it again. So I'm seeing, the type of quests that you'll be able to get. So it's you might have an NPC, and if you're able to assist him or him assisting you in killing certain bosses, then he will be available later down the line, which is something that, again, we've seen before. But if he dies along the way, then you're not going to be able to see how the story for that NPC pans out, which is something that I happen to enjoy. It's not particularly innovative when it comes to Souls games, but it is still a nice little addition that I personally like exploring. Because apparently if they do that, they're just gone forever. There's also been the confirmation that there will be areas where the environment will be your enemy. Stuff like Blighttown, Valley of the Fileman. But it seems like he's getting a little bit more creative. It's not just going to be poison this time. But of course that was going to be the case because it's a Miyazaki game. What is a Miyazaki game without a poison level? Now, I don't know about you guys, but pretty much everything that I have seen on this particular bit of news is pretty exciting for me. I did not share some of the stuff that was on that Reddit post because it involves lore and whatnot, and I know that a lot of you guys are going to want to take the game on and be completely blind to all of the lore, to anything that has happened, and therefore I'm not going to be talking about that stuff. But there are specifics there that talk about the main hub area, that talk about a little bit about the backstory of our character. Nothing too much, but still, I did not want it to talk about that information. So once again, if I forget to put the link in the description, please do remind me. I'm extremely forgetful because sleep deprivation and all that, not to mention YouTube frustrations like working on certain videos for hours after doing hours of research and them getting completely throttled and views not showing up. But anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to hit that like button because it is important. It does help out immensely. Like, I understand that some people, for some reason, don't want to hit that button, but like, I would really appreciate it if you did because it would really help me personally out a lot. But anyways, there's that. If you guys want to keep up to date with everything that I'm working on, remember, subscribe, hit the bell notification icon, all of that stuff. But most importantly, make sure to leave your comments and feedback down below because I love reading through those in my spare time. Once again, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.